Hi, I'm Laurent. I'm part of the team here at Kyan. We're a digital product studio, and today I'm going to be talking about the third phase of our product framework, which is the production phase. So we start with the discovery phase, which is the research and understanding what we're looking to do. Then the definition phase is working out how we're going to do it. And then the production phase is the doing it. So this is where our product team will come together, which be a multidisciplinary team of design, engineering, UX, product management, and they'll come together to form a product team that will work through the product backlog using various different methodologies, depending on the project size and scope, to work towards a shippable live digital product. How do we start the production phase? So following from the definition phase where we have a backlog that the team's happy with, we'll sit down and start planning out the first few sprints. So we use Agile typically here at Kyan, and most of the time we're using 2-week sprints. And before the team gets started, we'll normally have a sprint zero where the team is setting up. So that will be getting all the dev environments ready, getting access to all the software we need, all the third-party services we might need, and also getting the backlog into a position where the team can start developing. So in that first meeting, we're really working through maybe the first month's worth of tickets, prioritizing them, making sure there's enough detail in those tickets for the team to start working on them, and then gearing up for the start of sprint number 1. At Kyan, we use Agile, and our delivery team will typically use Scrum for most of the projects that we do. We tend to work in 2-week sprints and follow all the standard Scrum ceremonies. So that includes stand-ups on a daily basis with the product team and meetings at the beginning of each sprint where we'll do sprint planning and backlog refinement. And then at the end of each sprint, we'll do a sprint review and a sprint retro. As well as the product team running through sprints, we'll typically have 3 or 4 other pieces of work that are happening at the same time. So we'll have the DevOps side of things, which will be looking at what infrastructure do we need, what's the live and staging environments going to look like. Also things like what's our route to production. So are we going to have continuous deployment, continuous integration? How are we running the test suite? So it's a kind of multi-part role where we're looking at what's the right environment for the product, but also how can we create a tool chain that is efficient for the team to use and quick for us to deploy code. Another important one will be security. So what's the right level of security we need for this product? We work in financial services, banking, as well as some other regulated industries. So we need to make sure we're applying the right level of security and best practice to each product that we develop. It's a separate team that will work on data security and product security and infrastructure security. So then there's design ops as well. So every team will typically have a product designer, but also what are the supporting tools that team need from a design perspective. So what's the design system going to look like? Where is that going to be kept? What's the process for updating and managing the design system? So that's another strand that happens alongside the product team working on the actual product backlog. For the last 10 years at Kyan, we've always had an in-house QA department for us in terms of making sure the quality of what we're building is right and making sure we are efficient with our time and our clients' time. We felt that having testing running alongside the product team as we're building stuff is the most efficient way to work. So rather than doing all of the QA and testing at the end of the product cycle, we do it alongside as each feature is developed, and QA form a key part of each product team. So as well as a QA team, we also run test-driven development here at Kyan. So as our software engineers are developing code, we are also writing tests alongside that code at the same time. And that library of tests forms the test suite, which is run every time that someone commits a new piece of code or before we deploy to a staging or live environment. And test-driven development is definitely one of the areas at the moment that's changing a lot. With the advantages we can leverage through AI now, actually our test suite coverage and speed of delivering tests has significantly increased. So we can deliver a bigger test suite with more coverage much more efficiently than we ever could. And that's been one of the quick, easy wins for us as a team in terms of adopting AI into our workflow. So sprint planning. Sprint planning will bring the whole product team and the client stakeholders together and run through the plan for that next 2-week period. So that will be prioritizing the tickets, prioritizing the backlog, as well as going through each of the individual tickets in that backlog to make sure we fully understand it and we have all the detail we need. So it is, as the word implies, is the planning phase for that next 2 weeks so that everyone in the team knows exactly what we're doing and the priority in which we're doing it. Backlog refinement will typically happen once or twice throughout the week prior to the sprint planning. And that activity gives the team time to prepare for the next sprint planning session. So we're thinking about what's next on the horizon, what tickets we need to make sure are lined up, and if there are any blockers or challenges that we need a bit of time to prep before we get into that planning session. So we'll normally do at least 1, ideally 2 backlog refinement sessions before sprint planning. So stand-ups at Kyan are typically virtual meetings that we will do with the whole of the product team. They're normally about 15 minutes long, and it's an opportunity for everyone to let the rest of the team know where they've got to. So we try not to use it as a chit-chat general catch-up, but instead it's about what you've managed to get done, what you're working on next, and if you've been blocked or hit any issues, to let the rest of the team know what those are. The key thing about an efficient product team is all the different people that are working on a sprint know what's happening with everyone else in that team, because ultimately you're all heading towards the same point where everyone's work is going to be completed at the same time. So if something's looking delayed, if we have to push something out, it's important that that's communicated as early as possible so that everyone else in the team can remain efficient. So the first meeting at the end of the sprint will be the sprint review. Again, that will be a meeting where we bring together the product team and the client team, and we go through all of the tickets and features that were developed in that sprint and review them together as a team. So that's to make sure there's rarely been any misunderstanding, but it's the kind of final opportunity to make sure everything that was built has been built right and the way that it was expected, and it works the way we're expecting. And also it's ultimately the first opportunity to gather some feedback. So has how we envisioned this feature working in our heads actually materialized and turned out to be right, or are there some tweaks that we need to make going into the next sprint? Ultimately, it's an opportunity for the team to come together, reflect on the work that's been done, and change the plan going forward accordingly. Sprint reporting is typically done by the product manager working on that team. The benefit of doing sprint reporting is so that we can understand how the team is working. So it's going to look at our burn down rate, the speed that we're getting through tickets, and mapping that on a sprint by sprint basis so that we can watch our cadence change as the team gets used to working together and gets further through the product. Ideally, we're looking for like a 10 to 15% improvement after each sprint as the team gets more efficient. Everyone knows what everyone's doing, everyone has a better understanding of the product, and we're taking the learnings from the next meeting, which is a sprint retro, to make us more efficient sprint on sprint. The sprint retro, I think, is one of the most important meetings within the whole framework. And it's an opportunity for everyone in the team to reflect on what went well, what went less well, and talk openly about any changes that we think we need to make in terms of how we operate as a team. So we'll typically use like 90 minutes to discuss the sprint, the challenges, and where we can, some solutions. Sometimes the solution will be bigger topics that will need to be taken into a separate session afterwards, but capturing all that feedback and then allowing the product manager to try and work that into the next sprint or the next series of sprints so that we get that continuous improvement that we're always looking for. So what are the watch outs for this phase? Well, in this phase, you have more people working on the project. So it's important to be well organized. Hopefully all the good work that you've done in the discovery and definition phase mean that you're going into this with a good backlog, all the hard technical questions worked out, and a clear plan of what needs to be delivered. But your product manager needs to be on the ball in this phase, because they're really the quarterback that is planning what everyone's doing, and whenever there is an issue, they're the person who's going to jump in, help either that developer or designer solve the problem, be the lead on the communications back to the product owner, and really manage that process from beginning to end. So the product manager is the star player in this sprint. Don't know why I'm using sporting analogies now. You do need to be responsive in this phase. This phase is normally, 2 or 3 months. In that time, you're going to have things like holidays, people being off sick. You might have to deal with a change for, someone in the team changing out for someone else. So those kind of things will impact how efficiently the team works, and it's down to the product manager to help try and manage that impact as much as possible to keep the team on track. There isn't really an opportunity to stop in this phase either, like there is in discovery and definition, where we could have a long pause between those phases. We could even break those phases up into different periods. Once you've got a product team going, they kind of need to run through to the end, because if you were to stop them halfway through, come back 3 months later, you're gonna lose all that cadence and speed, and you're kind of gonna have to pick everything back up and learn again. So once it starts, you've kind of got to see it through to the end. With product development, all of that planning you do is obviously to make you as efficient as possible, but you also have to go into it knowing that there is going to always be an element of flexibility needed. Plans for big complex products never map out exactly as you think they will, whether that's a feature that changes, a competitor doing something in the market that means you have to pivot slightly, some feedback you get early on from some of the early feature developments that slightly change the perspective on where the MVP needs to get to. All of these things will impact the production phase, and you have to be willing to adapt and change and not get too frustrated with that, because that's just part of the process. So that's the last part of our digital product approach. Over the coming months, we're going to do individual deep dives with some of the members here at Kyan and get some subject matter experts for you to talk in more depth about some of the individual activities and why we do them. And hopefully that was useful and you've enjoyed it, and we'll continue to do more. Thanks. Like and subscribe.